Hey everybody, Jeff Tidwell here once again with one of my tweet videos. Welcome back, and I hope you enjoy our latest foray into my tweets from the past, going all the way back to October 2018. And of course, for the new comers here, if you do enjoy the content, please do hit like and also subscribe if you want to see more. And if you're really hardcore, hit the little bell for some notifications. Of course, I can be found on Twitter at RealJeffTidwell. I'm also on Minds, Gab, check out their Dissenter app and free speech web browser, Parler, Telegram, Instagram, and you may be watching this on YouTube, but I'm now also on BitChute. So definitely check me out over there. And of course, if you find my cadence to be a little bit on the slow side, you can always hit the 2x speed button and get all of the information in half the time. That's double bang for your buck, which is a pretty solid deal, so check that out below as well. And leave me a comment with your thoughts and observations about today's content. I look forward to hearing from you. And without further ado, let's hop into some tweets. So we have our first tweet here, which is pretty simple. You are not your ego. Your ego is a tool for you to use as you see fit. And like any tool, it can be misused. Others may question how you use it, but you are not your own ego. Your ego is just part of you. It's part of us. It's part of everybody. You are not your body, just as you are not the tools you use when interacting with other human beings. May it be through commerce, or if you're in a social setting where ego is a factor. Your ego does not represent your identity, who you are. It is a large part of your identity. You may feel that your ego is, important to maintaining your identity. But in itself, it is not your identity. It is merely a tool that you can maximize and minimize, pump and buff and nerf as you see fit. It should be viewed in that framing, in my opinion, because too often I see people associating their ego with themselves. So they don't want to be wrong. They don't want to be taken in a negative light. It hurts their ego. They don't want to ever have to, deflate their ego. Now, I say that if your ego is so small that you're afraid to deflate it out of fear of maybe losing it, well, that's something to work on, because it is a very powerful tool that should be calibrated for use. And you should learn to master your ego. Now, this is a long, hard process. There's many books you can read about this subject. Read a book on persuasion. Read a little bit about how you can elevate your optics when necessary and deflate them when it's more appropriate. But in general, ego should not be seen as the self. You may have a different spiritual outlook or an intellectual outlook on what ego actually pertains to, but it's sort of like when and I haven't taken DMT or acid or any of these mind-altering substances to really give you the report, but they are known for expanding your mind and helping you sort of slowly kill your ego. And in some ways, just as there's a contradiction in your body and your mind being separate but also connected, there's a contradiction there. Well, there's a contradiction in killing your ego. When you kill your ego, well, some people kill their ego to save it. So this is all kind of metaphysical talk, but at the end of the day, it's just important to remember that your ego is not you. It's a tool that you can use to affect outcomes and to make it more probable for you to come out on top, or at least level in the playing field, may it be social, commercial, or otherwise. And along those lines, I actually have a second tweet here, a series of tweets that continue down this road of talking about how you are your own master. Don't let your ego control you. You know, you can be wrong, you can be right. Associating these things with the self, putting them on your ego, you know, inflating it when you're not in a very you don't have a lot of merit in making that decision. If what you're trying to push is observably untrue, or there's something you're doing not quite right, but you're saying, well, no, I need to push forward. Like, are you saying, Jeff, that I should just push forward, like inflate my ego all the time? And I say, no. You know, like any tool, it can be misused. And others may question how you use it. So this is just a general recalibration tip. This isn't about putting your ego forward when it shouldn't be put forward. The idea is, though, if your ego is so small that you're unable to inflate it, that you're stuck in this sort of cage, per se, of not being able to raise your ego, you just feel like a victim, you feel like you're on the lower rung, you're being oppressed. And it's better to think in a way where you can inflate your ego. You have that ability. It's there. You can inflate it at any time. But you have to teach yourself how to do that, especially if you may have imposter syndrome or a inferiority complex. This tip isn't as easy to grasp. But hey, ego is a tool. Once you figure that, you can start to work from there. You know, baby steps, micro steps, whatever you'd like to call it, one at a time, you can do it. You just have to get the ball rolling. Get started. And then practice. Okay? And soon you won't be embarrassed in social situations. You won't be embarrassed in business situations, because you'll have learned that you can make yourself look really great when it suits you, when it suits your situation or your goal. Or you can make yourself look not so great. You can deflate your ego and, you know, take a loss when when the people have decided, when you've looked at the situation yourself and gone, well, oh, this doesn't look very good for me. Maybe if I remain humble and I take the loss, or I stand my ground and I get through and have a balanced outcome, whatever it might be. You know, you might not win, but losing your hubris when you're losing, or you're in a situation that looks too hard, it might be a lose-lose scenario if you're unfortunately in there. It can be helpful to be able to reduce your ego and meet the needs of that situation. But there is another tweet here. How much emotional pain will you accept from media before you open your echo chamber door? What's the threshold required to challenge your confirmation bias, to set aside anger, begin absorbing new information, and to manage the patterns of cognitive dissonance holding you back? These are good questions for everybody, all 7 billion of us. Don't be afraid to ask these questions. You always have a choice. Freedom of movement in thought and body. Many points of articulation. Those that seek dominion over you will use any tactic imaginable to hold your mind in a prison, and some of these folks are more obvious than others. Escape the shackles. Be your own master. You got this. So as you may know, there's a heat wave going on. I live in Massachusetts here, but across the country, across North America, there is a heat wave. And that means we may be headed back to the rainforest. But fear not, gentle listeners and watchers of Jeff Tidwell. I can bring you with me. I'll just have to invite you along to the rainforest, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. So, back to this tweet. How much emotional pain will you accept from media before you open your echo chamber door? So the media is creating this sense of mass depression among many of its viewers, sort of stoking fear and panic. Some would say moral panic, a modern religion, in people, showing them that things aren't going so great. We have to make a change. We have to create a situation where there's hope again. But they do this depending on really who's in office, who's in power, who is winning the culture war, who's losing the culture war. The media will do this for all kinds of reasons. A lot of them are about money. Follow the money. Follow the money with the media. What serves them best? The corporate cash has to keep rolling in, right? But in order to maintain that cash flow, they need to have steady viewership. And they need to make you feel like you're a part of something. So they may resort to the nearest moral panic and get you all riled up, tuning in and making sure you're not missing 1 second of the depravity and all the evil going around that we have to stand up and fight. But a lot of people just go into a sort of depression. They're like, well, it looks like the president, for example, is an orangutan that is destined to destroy the world with his evil intentions, and he's also incompetent. He's both the most evil person in the world, and he's incompetent. That's just double bang, man. That's double bang for your buck, and I'm not buying. But I have to be inundated with the media trying to frame the situation very poorly. So that gets you to the polls to vote for their preferred politicians. It's pretty simple. And that's one possible goal. But of course, it does revolve around keeping the money flow going. So if you're in an echo chamber, you're staying in there, you're not listening to the other side, you're not listening to anything positive, you have nothing positive to say, you're putting negative messaging out there, orange man bad, orange man bad, orange man bad, and that really gets you, maybe that feeds your energy. I'm not trying to judge here. If you want to go out there and shit post and do what you want to do on Twitter and elsewhere, go ahead and do that. Just keep on pounding that negativity, see what comes out of that. Kind of like getting water from a stone, but hey, sometimes people, they can really benefit from negative energy. Getting negative energy can bring them positivity. It is a very interesting situation, but if they are in emotional pain and they don't open their echo chamber door to see the other side, to see where people are actually happy, and the stimuli they're getting, it's not showing them something happy, how much are we willing to take? How much are we willing to take? What's the threshold required to challenge your confirmation bias? Like, if you really don't feel happy with the way things are, but you're still looking at things in a partisan manner, what is on that other side? What is on the other side? Is there something positive that you're missing out on because you've chosen to disassociate from certain things for whatever reason it might be? You might have used an ad hominem attack. She is sexist. He is racist, and just kind of pushed away any information from the other side that challenges your perspective. You're very angry. Sometimes when you're angry, you don't want to see more of what makes you angry. You want to see things that make you happy. Some people fighting back against the evils that you may see. Now, this is me sort of projecting, but we're talking about in a rhetorical sense. If you're seeing evil, I'm trying to put myself into the head of somebody else. I'm trying to describe what I see. It's not mind reading people or projecting, but it's sort of presenting what I see as a common, highly potential situation, very probable situation. People are angry. Whoever's not in power in a country, whoever, if it's the Democrats in the United States or the Republicans, depending on the paradigm, depending on the year, the decade, people get angry, and the more angry they get, the more irrational they get. And because we are irrational beings as it is, well, it can be just this feedback loop of fear and loathing and hatred and, frankly, insanity. No good. So we have to challenge our confirmation bias and to set aside anger, begin absorbing new information, and to manage our patterns of cognitive dissonance. Now, I do have a new video out, Cognitive Dissonance Workout Routine, so check that out on BitChute and YouTube. It's a great video for getting those cognitive dissonance muscles worked out. It's all about repetition. Practice, practice, practice. Get used to working out those centers of the brain that handle, contradictions, and holding two opposite, opposing views in your head at the same time. And that can actually help you accept the ever-changing reality we see. Make your predictive abilities get a little bit sharper. It can actually be a pretty good thing. Just like working out your muscles right here, you want to work out your cognitive dissonance muscles and make sure you're not succumbing to your confirmation bias. But we might go through a lot of emotional pain. It might be a lot of anger and sadness and fear. Excuse me. And how much are we willing to accept? Like, are you willing to go into treatment? Treatment for Trump derangement syndrome, where you think the world is ending, even though the economy is in better shape than ever before, so on and so forth. How far do you want to go? How many therapy sessions are you willing to go to escape the depression, the mass depression? How many friends are you willing to disown? How many family members are you willing to push away? And how many people are you willing to defame and smear and say, rah, rah, rah? Private company can do what want, deplatform, deperson, debank, demonetize, censor everybody I don't like. What are you willing to do? How much destruction, how much distress are we willing to take on before we open the echo chamber door and let out all the farts before we get asphyxiated? What is that line? What is the threshold required to challenge our confirmation bias? How convicted, how committed are we to these positions? Maybe we should actually, deflate our ego a little bit when we're not completely sure, or if we have just an authority that we're appealing to. Richard Feynman said that science is the belief in the ignorance of experts. If we just have this authority that we're, appealing to, we have to insert more critical thinking in there. We can't just go with that and walk away. Eventually people do. We all do. I do. You do. We all do walk away once we're satisfied with what we've seen. We've seen enough sources. I would hope it's more than one. I would hope it's at least two, maybe 3 or 4. Whatever number of sources it may be, we do reach that point where we just go, I'm satisfied. I don't need to see anymore. But the thing is that we should, be well aware of just how far we're willing to take our confirmation, without even addressing new information. If we have addressed new information, we have set our cognitive dissonance aside, we just test every bit of new information that comes in and give it its real, rightful shake, give it a couple of minutes of our time. Time is the currency, but, it's good to invest a little time when you want to get a more balanced, nuanced perspective on something. You can't just go with your first notion, your first impression, your preconception. You need to actually assess the new information that comes in. And we are all victims of this. I've been a victim of this, where sometimes I do get a little bit just too comfortable at what should be my vacation home, my echo chamber. It's not good to live in your vacation home. It's good to have a place to come back to at the end. And where you should live, most of the time, and that is your actual home, not your vacation home in the echo chamber. So, managing the patterns of cognitive dissonance is difficult, but it's part of our system. We are a pattern-based organism, and we get used to the patterns. We get used to certain things, meaning certain things. We get used to labels. We'll put a label on something to mark it, to make sure we know exactly what we're handling. And it is kind of a hassle to change labels once they're on there for a while and they've been reconfirmed and reconfirmed. Our confirmation bias fortifies with the same information being reinforced by other people, media and otherwise. They just keep on reinforcing what we already believe. If we stay in the echo chamber, we get stuck. We get stuck on that opinion and don't want to change. Now, change isn't necessary. We might have already stumbled upon the number one opinion, the best way to go in our mind, and nobody can really challenge it. It's a question that only one person can ask themselves. So it's not that we have to change, but it's good to know your limits, know what you're dealing with. So here, I say these are good questions for everybody. All 7 billion of us can benefit from asking such questions. So don't be afraid to ask. How far am I willing to go with this without listening to anybody else? Like, when do I turn off the new information spigot, the pro-information spigot? It's a great question. And it's always good to remember that you always have a choice. You always have a choice. That's liberty. That's why we founded the United States of America, to have negative liberty and to have positive liberty. Freedom of movement in thought. No thought police here. No thought crimes here. And body. Many points of articulation. Those that seek dominion over us will use any tactic imaginable to hold our mind in a prison. Some of them more obvious than others. They'd be called sophists. So escape the shackles. Be your own master. Be your own master, okay? Listen to authority, but don't worship authority. That's why I preach about the modern religions. I say, we have some systems here that even the devoutly secular can follow, find a form of real-world moral dogma. Divinity in victimhood, if you're talking about the modern religion of social justice. And of course, this authority to worship for even the devoutly secular. You don't have to believe in the man upstairs, or Allah, or Buddha, or any other belief system, any other religion, but these ideologies, they can become quasi-religious in nature. And that's a modern religion. You have your social justice, global warming, institutions, moral panic, censorship, outrage culture, and even celebrity can be seen as a modern religion. And these things are just things to be cognizant about. I consider myself an ideological agnostic. There are some hard beliefs that I have, but I try to keep an open mind as often as possible and search out whatever side it might be, the left or the right, whatever dichotomy, whatever paradigm we're in, whatever situation we're in. I like to look at both sides or all sides and make a decision from there. So I like to have a choice and escape my shackles, learn how to inflate my ego when necessary, deflate it when necessary, and find a greater truth in the process. So it is a hot day today. Heat wave is on. I see the rainforest not far in the distance, so you may want to join me there. We'll see if I get there. So here's one. A sentiment I've seen when people try to inject logic or perspective into discourse during moral panic. Can you be more sensitive? Have a heart. In a perpetual state of outrage and fear, one should expect turbulence as attempts are made to descend from the stratosphere. So, we've been seeing a lot of moral panic throughout the past few years. Since 2015, 2016, there's been this sort of paradigm shift in the way that the culture war has gone. With President Trump winning the election, and then you have Brexit, and sort of other right-wing leaders coming into power across the world, people are moving a little bit away culturally. And it may not seem like this to some if they're in an echo chamber, but they're moving a little bit away from the social justice, this sort of identitarianism. May it be, far right, far left, however you want to label it. People are kind of moving away from politically correct standards and nature. Now, our authority figures may or may not like that that's happening because those are really useful for controlling people. Yeah, it makes it harder to control people when you can't tell them what to do, what to say, and to move them around and socially engineer things so that you're put into this very limited, narrow pathway, this very limited, narrow Overton window in which people can't really live their lives without following government regulations. May they be about the illusion of hate speech, or they may be about some other politically correct system. And of course they have, now we're seeing people deplatformed before they even get started. On Instagram, Ice Bay got deplatformed, the Miss Michigan, and all these different people are being mistreated, discriminated against based on what's in their heads, their ideology. And usually it's a mundane ideology at that. That's why we need an Internet Bill of Rights to make sure that people are not being treated like they just belong to these large groups and they say something that may be factual and then get kicked off because it offends the prophets and popes of the modern religion of censorship or any of the other sort of real-world moralistic ideologies that we've become very familiar with in recent times. So people will try to sort of, assess the situation, inject some logic and perspective in there, and they'll get hit with, can you be more sensitive? Well, I'm telling the truth. I'm trying to find, the uncomfortable, the sad truth about what's going on here. We have to ask some questions, some tough ones. Are you willing? No. Can you be more sensitive? You're not virtue signaling enough. Well, look, I'm trying to solve something here. I have to ask some difficult questions in order to do so. What am I going to do? I'm trying to give another side to it. People are becoming distressed. We have a moral panic. We have outrage culture, outrage on every corner. There's so much outrage out there, and people will say, oh, you're getting outraged over outrage. And I say, it's outrage all the way down. It's outrage all the way down. It's a constant swell of people critiquing this and exploding over that. When people come in to say there's too much going on, it's like, well, yeah, there is. There's no question about it. There is a culture of people that are they don't have anything else in their lives to give them purpose or meaning or guidance. So they use their moralism. They follow the modern religion of moral panic. And they point out, look, there is something evil. There's something dangerous to our society. It might not be something dangerous. It could be just something new, something unexplored. Or it could be something that the media is promoting. They're promoting this idea to scare you and to raise their ratings and to help out their side politically, whatever side that might be. maybe right or left. They're trying to promote viewership. They're trying to promote the social engineering, because that's what censorship is. It's socially engineering. It's removing speech and certain forms of dialogue and then making sure that you don't say those things. If you say them, if you use your freedom, your First Amendment rights, they're saying, well, we are not the government. You are protected. This is the XKCD comic, myopic version of freedom of speech that ignores the philosophical ramifications and looks at it as legalism. Facebook isn't the government. It's just about as large as one in terms of influence and power. Twitter isn't the government. Instagram's not the government. Reddit. All these major, and then they'll go, Chase is deplatforming people or debanking people because of their ideology. They're not the government. They're not the government. It's like, yeah, they're not the government. But the government isn't the entire world. The government isn't the entire situation. They're just one factor that could stand in the way of freedom. And in the United States, they chose to stay out of the way. They chose to stay out of the way. And so it's hard, to explain to people, like, we need to be able to speak. You might be offended, but it's not your right not to be offended. So they'll say, have a heart. You're not thinking about their feelings, about what's going on. You're not empathetic enough. You're not sympathetic enough. And I say, I am. I am as much as I can be. I'm sorry. I'm not going to end my day and end my life and ruin everything else in the world just because you're looking at one specific situation that's morally outraging you. Oh, these kids are listening to too much of that Miley Cyrus, whatever it might be. Oh, they shouldn't be watching PewDiePie. They're watching too much Minecraft on YouTube. Oh, they're looking at YouTube and finding supremacists and neo-Nazis, and they're finding Antifa, and they're getting influence. And I say, look, be a better parent. Okay, and that's the best you can do. Be a better parent to your children. Don't try to turn me or anybody else on the internet into a child. Don't try to parent other people's kids. Like, we do see that there are certain walls that shouldn't be pressed on, that shouldn't be pushed. We shouldn't have unconsented pornography out there. And we should have some, if parents want to have parental controls on their stuff, they can do that. But you can't let this fear and this panic cloud logic and reason. There are plenty of people out there that enjoy these things. Just moral panic. Used to be the satanic panic. And then it was the war on drugs. And then it's, people listening to the wrong music, heavy metal. And then it's watching the wrong TV shows, listening to Howard Stern. You're going to go to hell, they say. You're going to go to hell. It doesn't matter if they have a traditional religion or not. They have this modern religion of moral panic. Even if they're devoutly secular, they can send you right to hell. They can disassociate from you. They can do all these things they need to do to make sure that everybody's okay. Think of the children. Think of the children, they say. Everybody can be okay as long as you do as we say. As long as you can follow the prophets of this modern religion and get in line behind the disciples, If you join in and try to censor and remove and destroy the world of whatever it might be, commerce, try to make it so that people can't make decisions for themselves anymore. You take the individual agency away, and you say it's all because we want to have a more moral world. We're going to cast aside reason and bring in our faith that we are right, that we know what is objectively moral. And so I say that I'm agnostic to moral panic. Like, sometimes I see merit in there, sometimes I see reason in there, but oftentimes it is faith over reason when you're dealing with this. You're in a perpetual state of outrage and fear, and if someone tries to bring you down from that, well, I would expect a little bit of turbulence. Turbulence should be expected as attempts are made to descend from the stratosphere. If people are way up here with their moral panic and outrage and fear, and you're trying to bring them down and say, it's okay, you know, we'll get over this. We'll get over Mortal Kombat. We'll get over it. The children will see a little blood. They'll see blood later. Trust me. You know, do a better job of parenting. Don't buy your child the thing. Don't let them do the thing if you don't want them to do the thing. But don't tell us to stop the rest of society because of people that are, you know, too young or people that can't control themselves. They're not going to destroy our freedoms. You can't try to be that safe, be that about security that you'll throw away liberty. That's my opinion anyway. But I'm agnostic. I am agnostic on this modern religion. Moral panic. Not my favorite. So it seems we have entered something called the rainforest. So join me on the expedition into the rainforest, and I'll help bring you there. Nobody gets left behind. Come on in. So you may be feeling a little bit of perspiration on your forehead and your body. Check your pits. You may be experiencing the hot rays of the sun strongly stroking your skin, your hair, and your clothing. Hazing down through the clouds, and now you're stepping into the rainforest. Picture yourself, imagine yourself inside a rainforest. Green all around, branches, trees, animals, small little animals, monkeys climbing trees. Welcome to it. You're in the rainforest. This was kind of funny. Back in October, I was talking about Reddit and our politics, being driven by corporate neoliberal and Democrat media narratives. And that is the case now. It's almost exclusively the left over there. And I said they would like the Donald to be removed, i.e., that is to say, censored, even though it stands as the opposite pole ideologically to our politics. And I say finally, I think y'all need to read some Chomsky. So, as some may know, the Donald was quarantined last month in June of 2019. And it was quarantined for silly reasons having to do with a Media Matters hit piece and potentially some Media Matters trolls that caused it. Although it's not clear whether these people were regular users that said a couple things that I personally didn't find offensive, but some found offensive to our law enforcement. So that happened on Reddit. They quarantined. Didn't mean they got rid of it, censored completely, but it doesn't come up in search results. And they lost some of their privileges that made them so cool in the first place. So that kind of came true. They would like to have the Donald censored or quarantined. And hey, it happened. We knew it would, and it's still about almost 18 months until the election. Imagine how much more we're going to see between now and then. Hopefully not much. Hopefully free speech reigns supreme and we can get to what the president was talking about and bringing free speech back to college campuses here, and of course investigating groups like Google, who may, of course, be socially engineering using the modern religion of social justice, and of course, manipulating search results and trying to get people into those narrow corridors and bring them right to the results that Google would prefer ideologically for them to reach. And of course, Project Veritas has been very great about bringing these things to light, doing some leaks, getting some information, and of course about Pinterest as well. So, we can see that there are steps being taken by these sort of left-leaning corporations and large groups to exact authority and enact authoritarian measures on people they disagree with, or as Noam Chomsky would say, their views they despise. They put limitations and censorship on the views they despise, even if they are moderate views, even if they are mundane right-wing or even left-wing views. Notably, if they interfere with their corporate cash, their revenue from ads, and they get advertisers are the reason. They'll say, oh, advertisers are why we demonetized your video. There's plenty of other people out there that would want to advertise on you, that's find your content entertaining and so forth. And this is why I don't monetize, by the way. And then they'll say, well, if it's not the advertisers, then it was the algorithm. The algorithm made this arbitrary decision to demote you, to demonetize you. And, we've also had people doing reports, so you won't have a comment section. So, of course, use the Dissenter app from Gab to put a comment section on any URL, any forum, anywhere you'd like to add a video, may it be an article, anything, to add a comment section and to get your free speech back on the internet. I think Chomsky would like that. Chomsky has very nuanced views. I don't agree with a lot of what he has to say. I don't believe in the sort of anarchy side of socialism and all this stuff like that. I don't have such a negative impression of the military-industrial complex. But on free speech, there are few people greater than the linguistic chops of Noam Chomsky. So here's one about association. I think I've said this a couple times, but I'll say it again because it's always worth reiterating. I don't always agree with everything or everybody that I share, retweet, like, follow, and others. That would be on Twitter, social media like Parler, Gab, Minds, Telegram, any of these, Facebook. There is great value in listening to different perspectives, various sources, and culling those from our own worldview. We are far more complex than a single characteristic could ever indicate. So I have come under fire. I've had people say to me like, oh, you followed this person? You liked that tweet? You liked that tweet? How? Why are you retweeting this? Why are you sharing that? Why do you associate with that? Guilt by association, guilt by conversation. Why are you even talking to that person over there? That's outside the range of acceptable to me. That's what they'll say. I'm not speaking for myself. And I say, I don't always agree with everything that I see and like and follow. There may be a couple of sentences in there. 20 or 30% of what they said. Maybe this overarching theme or tone or point may make me a little bit more happy to give them a little kudos, give them a nice merit boost when they say the things that I like. They're spreading a message and messaging in a positive tone, perhaps, that I prefer. I'd like to continue to do that without being told that I can't associate, that I don't have freedom of association, that I'm platforming or promoting views that somebody else might not like, and they're like, well, how can you like this when he said or she said this? And I'll say, well, look, this is the paragraph right here that I liked. And I'm not going to just completely give them zero credit all the time. Even if I disagree with about half of it or more, I'm still going to give them kudos where it's due. Like, I can't give half a like, you know? But if I see something that, especially if it's something that challenges my perspective and makes me think, I want to share that. Like, I don't want to cultivate, it's hard not to cultivate an echo chamber because I'm sharing, I'm sharing a lot of pro-Trump material. I'm sharing a lot of things that are like left libertarian or libertarian. And not everybody is going to agree with me on those perspectives, but I'm at least, I'm putting up things that I think, help reinforce positive messages for the world, things that I like to see. Not every word, not every nuance, but enough. Enough. There is great value in listening to different perspectives, various sources, and culling from those our own worldview. We are far more complex. We are individuals. We are not the groups we are a part of. We are the individual. And there's no singular characteristic could ever indicate who we are. I was going back and forth with a guy here. It said something about all politics center around identity, so all politics are identity politics. And I said, I talk about identity politics a lot in my videos, my friend. I'm not going to talk about it this time, but no! You can't say, these words are just a construct. Identity politics, we're talking about something specific here. We're talking about the modern religion of social justice, intersectionality, intersectional feminism, cultural Marxism, social Marxism, these collectivist ideologies. That's what we're talking about when we talk about identity politics, putting people into groups, trying to divide them up, put wedges between them, make them fight, make them vote the way you want, make them do the thing you want. Like, that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about the fact that, they appeal to our identity. Like President Trump appeals to the identity of American. So in that sense, okay, it's an identity. But he's trying to get Americans to vote for him. It's like about getting to that next level. Above being woke, you have, woke breaks at a point, and you have to go to we're all human beings. And if we're in this country and we're working in the context of this country, we're all Americans. It's more productive to think of it in that frame than to go, well, you're a white American, you're a female American, you're this American, you're that American. Those are important distinctions as well. But when you're trying to talk to people, and you're not just looking at stats and looking at demographic information and looking for specific solutions that may only pertain to one or two demographics. When you're talking in general, you don't want to be constantly bringing it back to group. You want to focus on the individual, the character, the merit, and the flaws of who it is. And I said I wouldn't talk about identity politics, but there it is. My opinion on identity politics. It is interesting that I should reach this tweet, because this is another tweet about cognitive dissonance and being able to hold two conflicting ideas. So let me actually just read this one for you. We'll get a little touch of that cognitive dissonance workout routine from my other new video. A mental exercise for your day. Try your best to hold two seemingly opposite or conflicting ideas in your mind's eye at the same time. It may be difficult, so start slow. Don't strain your brain. Don't strain your brain. In time, you may find this exercise to produce some interesting results. Good luck. So once again, the idea is to hold two seemingly contradictory or conflicting ideas in your head at the same time. Two things that seem opposite, just any two things you can think of. And again, this can be cognitively straining, trying to hold things that seem to be contradictory in your head. One positive here, one negative there, whatever it might be on whatever topic. Get used to holding contradictory ideas, because sometimes the truth ends up being the opposite of what we expected. But if we never get into the mindset of expecting and priming ourselves to receive the opposite of what was expected, what we had confirmed in our confirmation bias to becoming, well, we're not as prepared. And that's why you'd exercise. You wouldn't want to pull a muscle at the gym. You wouldn't want to pull a muscle on the field. So why would you want to pull a muscle when you're trying to wrap your head around these new ideas? Doesn't make sense to me, so I say work it out. Try your best to hold two seemingly opposite or conflicting ideas in your mind's eye at the same time. Cognitive dissonance workout routine. Think I found one here. Tweets, tweets, tweets. Okay, let's talk about precedent for a second. Precedent doesn't fade in and out as needed. Once we've set it in a given area, politically, reality has been forever changed. Allowing negative things to become a precedent will have cascading effects over time. And we may not be ready to face the increasingly complex web of destruction. Now, negative being subjective, of course, but there are certain questions where if we strip ethos and pathos from the situation at the beginning and focus on logos, so ethos is ethic, pathos is emotion, logos is logic. Humanity can come to a consensus. If we can strip the ethic, the moral, the moralizing, and the emotional reaction from the situation at the beginning and focus on logic, humanity can come to a consensus. Thinking freely and clearly en masse is a monumental task, but I am optimistic. How do you feel inside of the rainforest? Isn't it beautiful? You can even smell the sensations of the environment. All the different dewdrops and so on and so forth are coming right in, and it feels like you're in the Amazon, right down there. Hopefully we meet some ladies on the way. Huh? All right. So precedent doesn't fade in and out as needed. So it's hard to reverse precedent. I actually have another video about that titled The Dangers of Government Expansion. It's like once you set a precedent, once you push forward on a particular bill or legislation, whatever it might be, it's really hard to pull it all back. It just gets baked in over time. It doesn't fade in and out. The paradigm doesn't shift back and forth. Sometimes you put something in, and it's a long time before you can actually shake the box again, shake it up and change the outcome, because things are just baked in. The precedents have been set. And then it's not fair to treat people by a different standard, right? So it doesn't fade in and out. It's usually set and then forget. Precedent. Set it and forget it. That's the unfortunate reality. And once we've set it in a given area, reality has been forever changed. Forever changed. Allowing negative things to become a precedent will have cascading effects over time, and we may not be ready to face the increasingly complex web of destruction. Once you set a bad idea in motion, it's really hard to find a counterforce. Like it will meet one. Inertia doesn't go forever. It will meet a counterforce. But it's harder and harder. Like when we think in terms of emotion, when we think in terms of our personal ethics, our ethos, our morals, and we're not thinking about the actual reality. We're just putting that aside because we feel strongly. We've allowed our ego to take over our reasoning paths, our path to rationality. Of course, negative is subjective. It could be positive. It could be something else. And there are certain questions here where, stripping ethos and pathos from the situation at the beginning, starting with a fresh, clean slate, as little emotion as possible, as little construct as possible, not worrying about laws, not worrying about any of these things that hold us back. Of course, maintaining a relatively moral frame, nobody gets hurt, do no harm, of course. But, we have to consider reason. We have to consider the truth of what's really happening, the science behind what's going on, the economics, the psychology behind what's going on. So if we focus on logos, humanity has an easier time coming to a consensus. Thinking freely and clearly en masse is a monumental task, as we've seen. It's really, really hard, especially when you have groupthink and you have people trying to control your every move and condition you this way and hypnotize you that way and do all this different stuff to our brains to make us, to brainwash us, as it were, to what they want us to do, to pull our heartstrings, to make us think, think of the children, forget everything else, forget reason. Think of your God. Don't think about anything else. Think about what God would do, what Jesus would do. That's, the traditional moralism of religion. But then we have the devoutly secular version, the modern religion. People will just go with whatever, an institution says, an authority figure. They'll go with that. And they won't think. They won't have to think. Somebody else will do the thinking for them. They'll appeal to authority and defer their thinking, their critical thoughts, to somebody that knows better. They know better. They'll say that. But that won't be necessarily true. So I am optimistic. I think that the public has more agency. Google isn't going to be able to flip 15 million votes if we get our head in the game and think really carefully about what we're doing, what we're voting on, and what we're the information we're taking in. We're not looking at just one side. We're looking at least two, probably many more sides, and listening to everybody, and not just using Google, but we're also using DuckDuckGo. We're looking at our encyclopedias. We're looking at other sources, journalists from all across the political spectrum. That's the way you get completely informed. And even then, you're only halfway there. You're not quite to the truth. The truth is unknowable, of course, but you have a pretty good approximation of where you're going and where we're going. So think clearly, think freely, and I think solutions to your problems will come just a little bit easier. 2 more tweets for you today. Oh yes, I have the Rainforest Blues. But it is a beautiful thing. Winter was fierce this year. Yes, it is. Okay, here's a fun tweet. I was retweeting the great Edward Snowden, former NSA analyst. And he says here, Edward Snowden, the UK just admitted the global mass surveillance system was used against civil society, people like you. These programs were never about crime or terrorism. That would say, that would mean safety or security. They're about power. It's about control. So I say here, in response to Edward Snowden, money, power, control. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. I've seen some commentary since Brexit that highlights how the people of the UK did not understand what they were voting for. In light of Article 13, among many other things, does it matter? They chose wisely. Those that voted to leave, in my opinion, chose wisely. Because we're seeing here a creeping authoritarianism from the UK government, from the EU, and of course, we've also seen in other areas of the world, Google partnering with the Chinese government. There's questions around that. Do your research, check it out, seek subject matter experts, and look around on what Google's been doing on top of their, normal social engineering behavior. But, we have a lot of these systems going into place that want to take away the freedoms of the citizen, of the individual, and put a little bit more power in the hands of governments and corporations, which, as I stated earlier in the video, they are getting closer and closer in terms of their power. And in fact, large multinational corporations like Facebook and Apple, Amazon, Twitter, and all these organizations, we've talked about Google a lot, they have just as much power, money, and influence as many smaller countries. So when you say, well, private company can do what want, there was a 1947, I believe, Supreme Court ruling about the free speech on the grounds of a private company town in which it was approved for some religious believers to proselytize on the streets of this company town. So we already have some precedent. We have decency laws. I think it's Section 230. I forget exactly what. But in this country here, United States of America, we do have some places where, we've had rulings that are similar. But then you have Article 13. And they just want to destroy the internet for the benefit of money, to bring in more revenue. But it really is about money. It's about power. It's about control. They don't want the masses to make their own decisions. They want to, again, put them in that narrow corridor, put them in that little Overton window of acceptable dialogue, and then say, well, anything outside of those windows is extreme. Everything outside that is extreme. And then you can't do it. You'll be ostracized, you'll be debanked, you'll be kicked out. And of course, if you share this meme, like memes are supposed to be free, it's supposed to be a free, creative, open internet. But they say well, if you share this specific meme that happens to have copyrighted material, well, we're going to go after you with Article 13. We're going to try to get some revenue from that. And it's just going to change the face of communication yet again. And not in the libertarian direction, but it's going into this authoritarian. We are in control. We tell you what you can and can't do, what you can and can't say, and we are listening to the lobbyists and the corporations and the authoritarians. We're listening to irrational people that are wrapped up in this modern religion of censorship, that they just want to get rid of everybody they don't agree with. It's no good. It's not good from a philosophical perspective. The Enlightenment era philosophers of the 19th century and going way back thousands of years to the earliest philosophers, nobody would agree with this idea that free speech is what somebody wants it to be. In fact, even me defining what free speech is, as I have many times in my videos, I say you should be warned by people like me and others that would try to define the range of acceptable speech. Like I try to be a free speech absolutist. There are limits. Credible threats of direct harm, and calls to violence, incitement to violence, calling fire in a crowded theater, unconsented pornography, defamation, slander, libel, doxing. Like we can kind of agree on a lot of these and a few other select scenarios where you don't want to have speech. And again, me defining that can get me some negative attention from people that are more free speech absolutists. Believe me, I would love to be. Don't mind platforming even people that are considered hate. I want their bad ideas, in my opinion, to be aired. I want that dialogue to happen. I want to be able to point to somebody and say, this is a bad hombre. I think so anyway. And that's my free speech. They have the right to their free speech. And the good ideas rise to the top. And oftentimes the bad ideas, they sink to the bottom over time. That's the process I like. And so, but then you get, absolute power, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. It corrupts absolutely. Like when you give people the power to silence or to control the dialogue or to control any system, really it's any system. When you have a system that has levers you can pull and control it however you'd like, well, it's human nature. Can't escape it. It will be taken advantage of. It will be abused whenever there's a chance. You've seen it in the economic systems a lot. Like if there's any loophole, they'll get a team of lawyers on it. They'll use their corporate and their corporate capital, their muscle, their billions of dollars, their millions and billions, and we're getting up in some cases to trillions of dollars to basically, they're the chip leader. They push you around. It's a big game of poker. That's what a large part of our legal system is. But absolute power, it's like no matter, even if you have great intentions, good intentions pave the road to hell. It's as simple as that. Absolute power. You live long enough to see yourself become the villain. And they also like to, and this really bugs me, because a lot of the commentary is centered around Brexit, saying the people of the UK did not understand what they were voting for. The people of the UK are stupid and ignorant and have no agency of their own. They didn't know what they were voting for. I'm like, do you want to have a democracy? Now, I know direct democracy is tyranny, and when you did the Brexit vote, or you had remain or leave, it was kind of tyrannical. A lot of people disagreed. About 50% of the people decided for the other 49-50% what was going to happen. You see the result of democracy being somewhat tyrannical, and yet that's the system you used. And then you say, well, we want to hold a second vote. We want to hold a second vote. You had your vote. You gave the public their civic duty, their option to vote for the referendum to leave the European Union. It's game over. That was it. No do-overs. No do-overs. Don't try to control. The control's up. The jig is up. It's going to be a hard road, but Brexit needs to continue. It's what the people asked for. One more tweet for you today. And I'll end with this because somebody was getting on Cassandra Fairbanks earlier today for talking about Area 51 and the UFO stuff and the people rushing the Area 51 base rather foolishly. And, of course, trying to see what's in there and talking about space aliens, not the illegal aliens that are coming over our border, but space aliens. And, of course, this person said, you should put your efforts back toward Julian Assange. And I agree. Julian Assange is a free speech hero. But I also agree that it is kind of fun to talk about UFOs and aliens. So, Cassandra, here's a shout out to you. Keep up the good work and keep searching for those space aliens. But I was going to say here, to Americans, if the presidential alert, you might have gotten that little presidential alert on your phone, a little buzz, and there was a lot of hubbub about that back in October. If that has gotten you thinking about mass surveillance and governmental overreach, please consider a donation to WikiLeaks. We must always keep our governments accountable and our First Amendment as strong as possible. Hashtag Free Julian Assange. So, of course, WikiLeaks is known for a few of their releases Most recently, they had the Vault 7, and they had their Podesta emails, the DNC emails, and all these things that kind of, pulled back the curtain on the Democrat Party and on the CIA. And that was very useful, getting a look a little deeper inside the deep state. And really helpful, showing us just the extent of the tools. Like I said earlier in the video, it's good to know what tools you have. Ego is a tool. But we also had these Vault 7 tools that the CIA was using to sort of do all kinds of covert operations, spy operations, and even reassigning different localities, different metadata to this information. Like they could actually make it look like an attack was coming from, say, for example, Russia or any other place. They could make it look like it came from there. There were all these things you'd never imagine. Just go to www.wikileaks.org and check out Vault 7. And of course, they went after the Democrat Party and released all those emails from Podesta when he got phished on his Gmail account, John Podesta, Hillary Clinton's campaign manager. So that happened, but before that, Julian Assange had also done some damage to the Republican Party. Chelsea Manning, then known as Bradley Manning, had released some information about war. I believe it was Afghanistan, and of course there was some things released from the Iraq War, a lot of cables, a lot of things there, and they've released all sorts of stuff from all different countries. So WikiLeaks is not just, if you're in that bubble of Trump derangement syndrome, you may think, Assange man bad, Assange man bad. But the reality is that Assange has helped keep governments accountable and help keep transparency up so that the public, who deserves to know, knows about what's going on inside our governments and even in some cases corporations. So I do say to the president, I implore you, President Trump, if you really care about our First Amendment rights, if you really care about freedom of the press and freedom of speech, you will free Julian Assange. Now, I understand there is some friction because he released documents that are sacred, classified to the U.S. government. And as President Trump has made America his brand, and he'll do anything to stand up against any sort of attack on America, I guess even though Julian Assange and WikiLeaks kind of helped him get elected, it would make sense that he would want to give them something back. But there's a lot of friction there. The U.S. government doesn't want whistleblowers revealing their secrets. So it's hard to pardon him when they have such a reason, and such really a fair reason, even though they're supposed to be public. We're supposed to know what our elected officials are doing. There are lots of things in this country that are classified, confidential. So it's really hard. But I still say, President Trump, do what's right. Free Julian Assange. And anybody out there that still hasn't read WikiLeaks and still hasn't read about the inner workings and the media collusion of the Democrat Party, I recommend it. Like Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, Independent, Green Party, Rainbow Party, whatever you might consider yourself. If you're an anarcho-capitalist, if you're, an Antifa democratic socialist, whatever it might be, check out WikiLeaks. Just get a little idea of how politicians work to change the optical situation and to control us. It's all conditioning. Orange Man Hitler, it's all conditioning. And that's both sides. That's not just Republicans or just Democrats. That's everybody. It's all a post-truth world, folks. Politics is a post-truth realm. And I do thank you very much for watching today's video. I had a great time. It's very hot here in the rainforest, but I'm glad that we made this journey together. Of course, if you have any comments or thoughts about today's video, please do leave me a comment below. If you enjoyed it, hit that like button. If you didn't enjoy it, hit the dislike button and drop me down in the algorithm. However you feel, I like to work on a merit basis. And of course, if you really like the content even more than that and you want to see a lot more, hit the subscribe button below and the little bell for notifications. Of course, I can be found at Real Jeff Tidwell on Twitter. I'm also on Gab, Minds, Telegram, Parler, and Instagram. And if you're not watching this video on YouTube, I recommend you get on BitChute. And if you're a content creator, use their importer tool to import your videos in one click over to BitChute. It's a BitTorrent-based video platform, and it's growing, and it's really, really cool. I consider it in many ways to be my primary platform. So definitely check that out. And remember, as I always say, everything I said tonight might be right. Or everything I said today might be wrong. Or probably, perhaps, some of it was right and some of it was wrong. I think that makes the most sense. Once again, thank you for watching, and I hope you have a great day and a good night.